What truly happened behind the gilded doors of power? Did love truly conquer all, or did forbidden passions simply ignite a path to ruin from ancient empires to 18th-century royal courts? The whispers of history tell tales of queens who dared to love beyond the boundaries of their crowns. Number 10. Marguerite of Burgundy. The year was 1314. The air in the French royal court was thick with a scent of intrigue, but what unfolded shocked everyone, even the most jaded courtiers. This was the Tour affair, a scandal that would forever stain the reputation of Queen Marguerite of Burgundy, wife of King Louis I, 10th of France. Marguerite was a beautiful young woman, but beneath the regal exterior a dangerous secret festered for years. It was whispered she had been conducting a clandestine affair with a dashing Norman knight, Philippe d'Arran. Her sister-in-law Blanche of Burgundy, wife of Louis X's younger brother Charles, was also entangled in a similar web, allegedly with Philip's brother Gotthard d'Or. A third sister-in-law, Jean of Burgundy, wife of Philip V, was suspected of knowing about the affairs and keeping silent, making her an accomplice in the eyes of the law. The bombshell dropped when Isabella of France, daughter of King Philip IV and Queen of England, visited her father's court. Isabella, known for her sharp intelligence and observant nature, reportedly noticed something amiss. She had given purses to her royal sisters-in-law and later saw them being worn by the Dole brothers. The seemingly small detail ignited the spark of suspicion when confronted. The Don brothers confessed, allegedly under torture. Their confession was damning. It spoke of years of illicit rendezvous, secret passages, and forbidden passions right within the heart of the royal residences, specifically the Tour d'Assel Tower on the left bank of the Seine. This tower, part of the city's defensive walls, was a place where dark deeds could be hidden from prying eyes. The revelation sent shock waves through the French monarchy, still reeling from the recent death of King Philip IV. Isabella's father. Adultery, especially by a queen, was not merely a personal betrayal, it was an act of treason, undermining the very legitimacy of the royal lineage. The potential for illegitimate heirs to the throne was a threat to the stability of the kingdom. The consequences for the Doron brothers were swift and brutal. They were arrested, tried, and found guilty of lèse majesté, treason against the monarchy. Their punishment was designed to be a terrifying public spectacle, a warning to anyone who dared to challenge the king's authority or dishonor his family. They were flayed alive, castrated, disemboweled, and then beheaded, their bodies dragged through the streets of Paris before being hanged. The horror of their execution sent a chill down the spines of the nobility. For Queen Marguerite, the punishment was imprisonment. She was stripped of her royal titles and confined first to the Château Guiard, a formidable fortress, and later to the Château d'Azur. Her days were marked by strict surveillance, her life reduced to a shadow of its former grandeur. The whispers surrounding her fate continued even behind prison walls. In April 1315, just over a year after the scandal broke, Margar died in captivity. Her death was sudden and suspicious, given her relatively young age. In the nature of her imprisonment, many at the time and historians since have speculated that she was either strangled or otherwise deliberately killed, perhaps on the orders of her husband King Louis V, who quickly remarried after her death. Timing was certainly convenient, as it allowed Louis to secure a new queen and hope for a legitimate male heir. Blanche of Burgundy faced a similar fate of imprisonment. She was also held at Château Guiard, but unlike Marguerite, she was later permitted to take the veil as a nun at the Maubusin Abbey, where she lived out her days in religious confinement. Her reputation forever tarnished. Jean of Burgundy, despite the strong suspicions against her, was eventually acquitted due to a lack of concrete evidence and the support of her husband Philip V, who stood by her. She went on to become Queen of France when Philip ascended the throne, highlighting the capricious nature of justice in the royal court's Tassel affair had a profound impact on the Capetian dynasty, particularly concerning the succession. Louis X did have a son, John, but he died within days of his birth, earning him the moniker the Posthumous, with no clear male heir. The scandal and the questions of legitimacy surrounding Margaret's potential issue added to the instability that ultimately led to the end of the direct Capetian line and the beginning of the Vaux dynasty. The tale of Marguerite of Burgundy stands as a stark reminder of the perilous dance between desire and duty in the lives of queens. where the consequences of forbidden love could be utterly devastating. Number 9. Caroline Mathilde of Denmark. The Danish court in the mid-18th century was a place of delicate balances held together by the frail sanity of King Christian I. Born in 1751, Caroline Mathilde, Princess of Great Britain and sister of King George III, arrived in Denmark as a young bride in 1766, full of hopes for her new life as queen. Her marriage to Christian I was not a love match, and it quickly became clear that the king suffered from a severe mental illness, displaying erratic behavior, paranoia, and periods of deep melancholy. His condition made him largely unfit to rule, leaving a power vacuum at the heart of the Danish government. This unstable environment became the perfect ground for intrigue and for the rise of ambitious figures. One such figure was Jen Friedrich Sture, a German physician who initially served as Christian II's personal doctor. Sture was intelligent, Gordic, and a man of the Enlightenment, deeply interested in radical social and political reforms. Quickly gained the king's trust and confidence, becoming an indispensable presence at court. As Christian's mental state deteriorated, Strue's influence grew exponentially. He began to essentially rule Denmark through the king, who often signed whatever documents Struensee placed before him. This gave Struck unprecedented power, which he used to push through a flurry of progressive reforms aiming to modernize Denmark and reduce the power of the nobility. These reforms included abolishing serfdom, ending torture, reforming the justice system, and promoting free speech, changes that were revolutionary for their time. During this period of Struensee's ascendancy, a profound and dangerous intimacy developed between him and Queen Caroline. Hill, lonely and neglected by her unstable husband, the young queen found intellectual companionship and emotional solace in the clever physician. What began as a discreet friendship soon blossomed into a full-blown love affair. Their connection was undeniable, and it became an open secret within the court. Though fiercely denied by those who benefited from Stu's power, the affair was cemented with the birth of Princess Louise Augusta in 1771, while officially acknowledged as the king's daughter. Whispers about her true paternity circulated widely. The strong resemblance of the princess to Struensee rather than the king further fueled the rumors, adding a layer of scandal to the burgeoning political drama. Struensee's radical reforms, his arrogant demeanor, and his open affair with the queen created a powerful coalition of enemies among the Danish nobility and clergy. The Dowager Queen Juliana Maria Christian, the seventh stepmother, and her son Prince Frederick, who stood to gain from Christian's removal, led the opposition. They saw Stu's power as a threat to their own influence in the traditional order of the kingdom. The resentment reached a boiling point in January 1772. On the night of January 16, the coup d'état was launched. Terini was arrested in his bedchamber, and simultaneously Queen Caroline Mathilde was taken into custody. King, easily manipulated, was persuaded to sign the arrest warrants, effectively sanctioning the downfall of his physician, and his queen Struensee was subjected to a Swiss trial, accused of usurpation of royal power and seducing the queen under duress. He confessed to the affair. His confession sealed his fate. He was found guilty of high treason and sentenced to a gruesome execution on April 28, 1772. Strue met his end on the gallows, his right hand chopped off before he was beheaded, and his body then quartered. It was a brutal end for a man who had briefly held immense power. Queen Caroline Mathilde, as a royal princess, was spared the same fate, primarily due to the diplomatic intervention of her brother King George III of Great Britain. However, she was divorced from Christian II, stripped of her royal titles in Denmark, and exiled. She was sent to Celle Castle in Hanover, a German territory belonging to her brother. Caroline Mathilde never saw her children again, only corresponding with them through letters. Her life in exile was quiet and melancholic, far removed from the grandeur and intrigue of the Danish court. She spent her remaining years in quiet reflection, a queen dethroned not by war but by love and political machinations. She died tragically young in 1775 at the age of just 23, likely from scarlet fever. Her death sparked a wave of mourning among her supporters and a sense of regret for the life she might have led. The story of Caroline Mathilde and Struensee remains one of history's most poignant tales of forbidden love that shattered a monarchy. and altered the course of a nation, leaving behind a legacy of reform and tragic personal loss. Number 8. Joanna Ist of Naples. The mid-14th century in southern Italy was a volatile cauldron of ambition, betrayal, and violence. And at its heart sat Joanna I, Queen of Naples and Countess of Provence. Born in 1326, Joanna ascended to the throne of Naples in 1343. At the tender age of 17, inheriting a kingdom riddled with political factions and dynastic rivalries, her reign, which lasted nearly 4 decades, was defined by a series of dramatic personal entanglements, accusations of murder, and a desperate struggle to retain her crown. Joanna's first marriage, arranged for political reasons, was to her cousin Andrew of Hungary, a member of the powerful Angevine dynasty of Hungary. The marriage was deeply unhappy from the start. Andrew was reportedly boorish and ambitious, demanding to be crowned king and rule independently, a move that would diminish Joanna's own authority. Neapolitan nobles, many of whom resented Hungarian influence, opposed Andrew's demands. Tension between the young royal couple, fueled by political intrigue and personal animosity, reached a horrifying climax on the night of September 18, 1345. Andrew, still only 19 years old, was found murdered at Aversa, strangled, and then thrown from a window. His body left in the garden below. Joanna, who was pregnant at the time, was instantly implicated in the murder, though she maintained her innocence, claiming she had been asleep and unaware of the plot. Suspicion fell heavily upon her, and her inner circle rumors swirled that she had orchestrated the assassination, perhaps with the complicity of some Neapolitan nobles, to rid herself of an unwanted husband and secure her own power. Andrew's brother Louis the Great of Hungary was outraged by the murder and vowed revenge. He launched an invasion of Naples in 1347, accusing Joanna directly of regicide and seeking to depose her. This invasion forced Joanna and her second husband Louis of Taranto, whom she married in 1346, to flee to Provence. While in Provence, Joanna bravely traveled to Avon in 1348 to appear before Pope Clement V, the supreme spiritual authority of the time. In a desperate plea for her legitimacy and freedom, she underwent a public trial, presenting her case and defending herself against the accusations of Andrew's murder. Remarkably, the Pope, who had his own political interests in southern Italy, formally acquitted her of the crime, perhaps swayed by her eloquent defense and the intricate web of political alliances at play. The Pope's absolution allowed Joanna to return to Naples and reclaim her throne, albeit with her reputation forever shadowed by the murder. Joanna's life continued to be a whirlwind of marriages and political maneuvering. After Louis of Taranto died in 1362, she married James Ivth, Prince of Morca, in 1363, another alliance designed to secure her position. James died in 1375, and in 1376 she married her fourth and final husband, Otto, Duke of Brunswick. Each marriage was a strategic move, often aimed at strengthening her claim to the throne or countering the various threats that constantly emerged from within and outside her kingdom. Despite these efforts, her reign remained tumultuous. The Great Schism of the Western Church, which saw rival popes vying for power, further destabilized her realm. Joanna unwisely sided with the Avian Pope Clement I, alienating the Roman Pope Urban VI, who was eager to assert his authority. In retaliation, Pope Urban VI declared Joanna deposed and offered her throne to her cousin Charles of Dazzo. Charles, hungry for power, invaded Naples in 1381, capturing Joanna. This time there was no escape. On May 12, 1382, Queen Joanna I was strangled in the castle of Miro Lucano, likely on Charles of Dado's orders, mirroring the alleged circumstances of her first husband's death. Her tragic end at the age of 56 closed the chapter on a life marked by relentless struggle for marriages and enduring accusations of murder. Joanna's story stands as a testament to a queen who fought fiercely for her power and her life in a brutal age, navigating a labyrinth of love, betrayal, and political assassination, always under the dark cloud of a death she may or may not have orchestrated. Number 7. Eleanor of Aquitaine. Music. Eleanor of Aquitaine, born around 1122, was no ordinary medieval queen. She was a powerhouse, a duchess in her own right. who inherited one of the wealthiest and largest territories in France. Her independence and fiery spirit were legendary, often clashing with the rigid expectations of royal women in the 12th century. Her two marriages, one to the King of France and the other to the King of England, both produced significant scandal and political upheaval, cementing her reputation as one of history's most compelling and controversial queens. Her first marriage in 1137 was to Louis VI of France. Initially, the union was one of the most powerful in Europe, joining Aquitaine to the French crown. However, their personalities were a mismatch. Louis was devout and aesthetic, while Eleanor was spirited, worldly, and loved lavish courtly life. The first major whispers of scandal arose during the Second Crusade, which the royal couple joined in 1147. While in Antioch, Eleanor developed a close relationship with her uncle Raymond of Poitiers, the charming Prince of Antioch. Raymond, a modic and handsome man, reportedly captivated Eleanor with his wit and chivalry. Their closeness was noticed by many, and chroniclers at the time hinted at an affair, whether or not it was a full-blown physical affair. Their public affection and intellectual rapport certainly caused significant embarrassment and jealousy for Louis. Eleanor even expressed a desire to stay in Antioch with Raymond, refusing to continue the crusade with her husband, a public defiance that shocked the European courts. This perceived betrayal and Eleanor's strong will contributed significantly to the deterioration of her marriage to Louis VI. After nearly 15 years and only 2 daughters, the marriage was annulled in 1152 on grounds of consanguinity, a common excuse for royal divorces. However, the true reasons were clearly Eleanor's independent spirit, Louis' discomfort with her influence, and the lack of a male heir. Just 8 weeks after her annulment from the King of France, Eleanor made a startling and strategically brilliant move. She married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou. Henry was 11 years her junior, known for his boundless energy and ambition. 2 years later, in 1154, Henry became King Henry II of England, making Eleanor Queen of England, a queen with immense personal wealth and vast lands in France. Her second marriage, though initially productive with 8 children including future kings Richard the Lionheart and John, was far from harmonious. Henry II was famously unfaithful with numerous mistresses. This contributed to a tumultuous relationship with Eleanor, who was fiercely independent and resented his infidelities and attempts to curb her power. Rumors circulated about Eleanor's own romantic life during this period, though these are more speculative and often used by her enemies to discredit her. One persistent whisper involved William Marshal, a renowned knight and future regent of England. While Marshal was certainly a close associate and loyal servant, the precise nature of any alleged romantic involvement remains unconfirmed, likely exaggerated by court gossip. The true scandal of her second marriage, however, lay not just in personal infidelity but in the political rebellion she orchestrated in 1173. Eleanor, feeling increasingly mortalized and imprisoned by Henry's dominance, openly rebelled against her husband. She encouraged her sons, particularly Henry the young king, Richard and Geoffrey, to rise up against their father, promising them power and lands. This was an unprecedented act of rebellion for a queen, actively inciting civil war against her sovereign husband. Her involvement in the young king's revolt led to her capture by Henry II. For the next 16 years, she was imprisoned, largely at Winchester in Salisbury, a cruel consequence of her defiant spirit and ambition. Even during her imprisonment, her influence remained strong as her sons continued to fight for their rights, and she remained a symbol of resistance against Henry II's autocratic rule. Upon Henry II's death in 1189, her beloved son Richard ascended the throne as Richard the Lionheart. Eleanor, now aged 67, was released and swiftly became a powerful regent. Demonstrating her astute political skills and unwavering determination, she traveled extensively, securing alliances, ransoming Richard from captivity, and holding the kingdom together during his long absences. In the Crusade, she lived a remarkable life, outliving all but 2 of her 10 children, and died in 1204 at the age of 82. Eleanor of Aquitaine's story is a compelling testament to a queen who broke free from conventional molds, pursuing power and passion in an age that sought to contain women. Her Scandalous relationships and rebellious actions ensured her place in history as one of the most formidable and fascinating figures of the Middle Ages. Number 6. Isabella of France. Isabella of France, born in 1295. Arrived in England as a princess of immense beauty and sharp intellect. Married to King Edward II in 1308, their union was meant to solidify peace between England and France, but he quickly became one of the most tumultuous and scandalous royal marriages. Isabella, initially eager to be a loyal queen, soon found herself sidelined by her husband's obsessive favoritism towards male courtiers, particularly Piers Gaveston and later Hugh Despencer the Younger. These relationships, which seemed to border on infatuation, alienated Isabella and much of the English nobility, sowing the seeds of resentment that would eventually erupt into open rebellion. Edward II's preference for Gaveston, a Gascon knight, was so profound that it overshadowed all other relationships, including his marriage to Isabella. Gaveston was showered with titles, lands, and royal favor, while Isabella was often neglected and publicly humiliated. After Gaveston's execution by the exasperated barons, Edward found a new favorite in Hugh Despencer the Younger. The Despensers, father and son, became the true power behind the throne, accumulating vast wealth and influence at the expense of other nobles and the queen herself. Isabella's patience wore thin as the Despencer's power grew unchecked, diminishing her own standing and leading to the exile of many of her allies. By the mid-1320s, the rift between Edward and Isabella was irreparable. In 1325, Isabella seized an opportunity for escape and revenge. She traveled to France on a diplomatic mission, ostensibly to negotiate a peace treaty between England and France concerning the Duché of Aquitaine. While in Paris, she refused to return to England, publicly declaring her refusal to live with her husband as long as the Despensers remained in power. It was during this period in France that Isabella met Roger Mortimer, an exiled English nobleman who had been a fierce opponent of Edward II and the Despensers. Mortimer was meek, ambitious, and equally eager to see Edward and his favorites removed from power. What began as a political alliance quickly blossomed into a passionate and scandalous love affair. Their relationship was a flagrant defiance of royal protocol and morality. But for Isabella, it was a source of strength and a symbol of her growing defiance. With Mortimer as her lover and political strategist, Isabella began to gather support from other exiled English nobles and even received financial backing from her brother King Charles IV of France. Their aim was clear: to overthrow Edward II and the Despensers. In September 1326, Isabella and Mortimer launched their invasion of England. Their force, though small initially, quickly gained widespread support from the English population and nobility, who were fed up with Edward's misrule and the tyranny of the Despensers. The invasion was a stunning success. Edward II, abandoned by most of his supporters, fled and was eventually captured. Hugh Despencer the Younger was summarily executed, his body drawn and quartered, a grim testament to the hatred he had inspired. With Edward II imprisoned, Isabella and Mortimer assumed control of the kingdom as regents for Isabella's young son Edward III. In January 1327, Parliament formally deposed Edward II, making Edward III the new king. However, the ultimate fate of Edward II remained a dark cloud. In September 1327, the imprisoned Edward II died at Berkeley Castle under suspicious circumstances. While the official cause was reported as natural illness, it was widely believed, and indeed history suggests, that he was murdered on the orders of Isabella and Mortimer. The method of his death, reportedly by a red-hot poker inserted into his anus, was chosen to leave no external marks, yet rumors of its brutality spread quickly, adding a gruesome chapter to Isabella's story. For the next 3 years, Isabella and Mortimer ruled England, their relationship an open secret. Mortimer, through Isabella, wielded immense power, acquiring vast lands and titles for himself and ruling with an increasingly autocratic hand. This power grab in their illicit affair quickly alienated many of the very nobles who had initially supported them. Young Edward III, coming of age, resented his mother's lover and the control they exert. In October 1330, Edward III, aided by loyal nobles, launched a surprise coup. They stormed Nottingham Castle where Isabella and Mortimer were staying. Mortimer was captured, tried for treason, and swiftly executed at Tyburn. Isabella was spared execution due to her status as Queen Mother and the King's mother, but she was removed from power and confined to a comfortable but restricted life, primarily at Castle Rising in Norfolk. She lived for nearly 30 more years, a powerful queen who had seized control of a kingdom through scandal and rebellion, only to lose it all, a stark reminder of the volatile nature of power and forbidden love. In the medieval court, number 5, Messalina. Valeria Messalina, born around 17 or 20 C, was the third wife of the Roman Emperor Claudius and perhaps the most notorious empress of her time. Her name has become synonymous with scandalous behavior, insatiable lust, and political intrigue that ultimately led to her dramatic downfall. She was the great-granddaughter of the Emperor Augustus, a woman of noble birth, and became Claudius's wife in 38 C, bearing him 2 children, including Pertanicus, his heir. Yet despite her position and apparent success, Messalina plunged into a life of extreme promiscuity and reckless ambition that shocked even the jaded elite of imperial Rome. The Roman historians Tacitus and Suetonius, though often prone to exaggeration, painted a vivid and damning portrait of Messalina. They described her as a woman obsessed with sexual conquest and exhibitionism. One of the most infamous stories claims she would disguise herself as a prostitute and compete in brothel, eager to prove her prowess and endurance. These accounts, whether fully accurate or exaggerated for dramatic effect, highlight the widespread perception of her brazen defiance of aristocratic norms and imperial dignity. Her affairs were not merely discreet dalliances, they were often public, audacious, and sometimes even involved forcing noblemen to sleep with her, fearing her power if they refused. However, Messalina's scandalous behavior went far beyond mere promiscuity. Her affairs often had a political dimension, as she used her sexual influence to advance her favorites, eliminate rivals, and consolidate her own power within Claudius's court. Claudius, who was reportedly often oblivious or easily manipulated, was seemingly unaware of the extent of his wife's activities. Messalina exploited his scholarly nature and his preference for his studies, relying on her network of allies and cunning to conceal her excesses. She grew increasingly bold, purging anyone who dared to stand in her way, including powerful senators and rivals to her children's succession. Culmination of Messalina's audacity came in 48 CE, with her public marriage to Gaius Silius, a handsome and prominent Roman senator. This was no mere affair, it was a bizarre and unprecedented act of treason. While Emperor Claudius was away in Ostia, Messalina, dressed as a bride and Silius as a groom, celebrated a full marriage ceremony with witnesses, sacrifices, and a wedding feast right in the heart of Rome. Silius, reportedly pressured into the marriage, even divorced his own wife to partake in this audacious charade. This was not a private act of passion but a political declaration, possibly a desperate attempt by Messalina to replace Claudius with Silius, believing the emperor was on his last legs, or simply an act of supreme recklessness and defiance. The scandal was too colossal to be ignored. Narcissus, one of Claudius's powerful freedmen and a loyal servant, finally decided to act, fearing for the emperor's safety and the stability of the empire. Narcissus exposed Messalina's actions to Claudius in vivid detail. He ensured that Claudius understood the depth of her betrayal, not just adultery, but an open act of bigamy and a plot to seize power. Claudius, shocked and enraged, finally awoke to the reality of his wife's treachery. He issued orders for her arrest in the execution of Silius and their co-conspirators. Silius was quickly put to death. Messalina, who had fled to the gardens of Lucullus, initially hoped to plead her case to Claudius, perhaps banking on his perceived weakness or her past influence. However, her efforts were in vain. Narcissus, fearing Claudius might falter and forgive her, moved swiftly to ensure her death. Messalina was approached by imperial guards. Realizing her fate, she reportedly attempted suicide with a dagger but lacked the courage to complete the act. Her death was reported to Claudius, who merely asked for a glass of wine, showing little visible emotion. Perhaps a testament to his relief or his detachment, her name was formally erased. And the populace, the marriage to Bothwell was the final straw, a coalition of Protestant lords calling themselves. The Confederate lords rose in rebellion against Mary. They accused her of tyranny and of complicity in Darnley's murder. Mary and Bothwell confronted the rebels at Carberry Hill in June 1567. Realizing her cause was lost, Mary surrendered to the lords while Bothwell fled into exile. Mary was imprisoned in Leyland Castle, where she was forced to abdicate her throne in favor of her infant son James. She escaped from Louvain in 1568 and attempted to regain her throne by force but was defeated. Fleeing south, she sought refuge with her cousin Queen Elizabeth I of England. Instead of refuge, Mary found herself a prisoner for the next 19 years, a constant threat to Elizabeth's throne as a Catholic claimant. Her life ended tragically on February 8, 1587, when she was executed for treason, accused of plotting against Elizabeth's life. The story of Mary, Queen of Scots, is a captivating and heartbreaking tale of a queen whose tumultuous personal life, marked by forbidden loves, suspected murders, and disastrous marriages, led directly to her ultimate ruin and her enduring legacy as one of history's most tragic figures. Number 2. Catherine the Great. Catherine the Great, born Sophie of Anhalt-Dürrst in 1729, ascended to the Russian throne in 1762, not through direct lineage but through a dramatic coup that deposed her unstable husband Peter III. Her reign, lasting over 34 years, transformed Russia into a major European power and earned her the moniker the Great. While celebrated for her intellectual prowess, her enlightened reforms, and her expansion of the Russian Empire, Catherine's personal life was famously unconventional, marked by a series of powerful and politically in phrases. Her marriage to the future Peter III was a disaster from the start. They were mismatched intellectually and personally, and Peter was known for his immaturity and cruelty. The marriage was likely unconsummated for many years, and Catherine had her first notable affair with Sarge Saltykov, a handsome courtier, which resulted in the birth of her son Paul in 1754. The paternity of Paul was widely questioned at court, with many believing Saltykov was the father. This early affair established a pattern of seeking emotional and physical companionship outside her loveless marriage. The most crucial of Catherine's lovers was Gregory Orloff, a monatic and ambitious officer. Orloff played a pivotal role in the military coup that overthrew Peter III in July 1762, securing Catherine's place on the throne. Their relationship was intensely passionate and lasted for many years. Orloff was not merely a lover, he was a powerful political ally, serving Catherine's interests and advising her on important state matters. He and his four brothers were instrumental in stabilizing her early reign. Catherine seriously considered marrying Olaf and even bore him a son, Alexei Gregorievich Baburki, born in Say. However, her advisors persuaded her that marrying a commoner, no matter how influential, would diminish her imperial standing or loss. Influence eventually waned as Catherine's attention turned to new favorites, but their relationship remains a testament to the intertwined nature of power and passion. Catherine's most famous and perhaps most significant lover was Gregory Pompkin. Their relationship began in 1774 and quickly evolved into a profound and lasting partnership that transcended mere romance. Potemkin was a brilliant statesman, military leader, and administrator, and he became Catherine's trusted advisor and de facto co-ruler. Their bond was intellectual, emotional, and intensely clever. Many historians believe they secretly married in 1775. To Henry VIII was officially annulled, posthumously declaring their daughter Elizabeth illegitimate. Just 11 days after Anne's execution, Henry VIII married Jane Seymour. The scandalous tale of Anne Boleyn, a queen who rose to power through love and ambition, only to be destroyed by the very forces she unleashed, remains a powerful and tragic narrative, forever etched in the annals of English history as a cautionary tale of royal desire and political ruthlessness. Music. Number 3. Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary, Queen of Scots, born in 1542, was a figure of immense allure and tragedy. A queen who inherited the Scottish throne as an infant and whose life was dominated by political intrigue Religious conflict and a series of disastrous marriages and scandalous loves raised in the sophisticated French court, and briefly Queen of France Mary returned to Scotland in 1561 a Catholic queen in a newly Protestant land, setting the stage for a lifetime of conflict. Her second marriage in 1565 to her cousin Henry Stuart Lord Darnley was initially a love match, a union that offered the promise of a strong Scottish line and a claim to the English throne. Darnley was handsome but also arrogant, volatile, and deeply ambitious. The marriage quickly soured. Darnley became jealous of Mary's influence and grew increasingly resentful of her close relationship with her private secretary David Rizzio, an Italian musician who had become Mary's trusted confidant and political advisor. Whispers of a romantic affair between Mary and Rizzio, though likely unfounded, fueled Darnley's paranoia and his desire to assert his authority. The escalating tension exploded on March 9, 1566. Darnley, along with a group of Protestant nobles, stormed into Mary's private supper chamber at Holyrood Palace. Mary, 7 months pregnant, watched in horror as Rizzio, clinging to her skirts, was dragged from the room and brutally stabbed 56 times. The murder was a calculated act of terror intended to frighten Mary, reduce her power, and some believe induce a miscarriage. This horrifying event left Mary deeply traumatized and solidified her hatred for Darnley. She never forgave him, and their marriage became a hollow shell filled with mutual suspicion and plotting. In the aftermath of Rizzio's murder, Mary sought comfort and counsel for James Hepburn, the fourth Earl of Bothwell, a powerful and ruthless Scottish nobleman. Both had remained loyal to Mary during the Rizzio affair and became her most trusted advisor and protector. Their relationship grew increasingly intimate, sparking intense gossip and leading to a deeply scandalous turn of events. On February 10, 1567, a massive explosion ripped through Kirkle Field, a house on the outskirts of Edinburgh where Darnley was recovering from illness. Darnley's body, along with that of his valet, was found in a nearby garden, not killed by the blast but by strangulation. The immediate suspicion fell squarely on Bothwell, who was widely believed to have orchestrated the murder despite being acquitted in a hasty and rigged trial. Bothwell's culpability was assumed by most, especially after his subsequent actions. In April 1567, Bothwell abducted Mary, holding her at Dunner Castle, though many believe this was a prearranged act. She was then taken to his castle at Borswick, where some accounts suggest he raped her on May 15, 1567, just 3 months after Darnley's death. Mary married Bothwell in a Protestant ceremony, sealing her fate and igniting a firestorm of outrage across Scotland and Europe. The marriage to her husband's suspected murderer was a catastrophic political blunder and a profound personal scandal. It confirmed the darkest suspicions of her complicity in Darnley's death from many and alienated vast swathes of her nobility from public records, and her statues were pulled down, an attempt to blot out her scandalous memory. The story of Massalina stands as a sensational warning from Roman history, a tale of unchecked desire and reckless ambition that saw an empress plunge into a spiral of depravity and ultimately meet a dramatic, bloody end. Number 4. Anne Boleyn. Annalyn, born around 1501, entered the English court as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon, but she swiftly captured the attention of King Henry VIII, setting in motion a chain of a vicious and political landscape. Her captivating intelligence, wit, and strong personality made her irresistible to the king, who became obsessed with her. Henry, desperate for a male heir and convinced that his marriage to Catherine was cursed, sought an annulment. This desire, fueled by his passion for and became known as the Great Matter, a struggle that would break England from the authority of the Pope and establish the Church of England for years, and served as Henry's mistress, enduring the public scrutiny and the slow, arduous process of the annulment. She was a woman of ambition and conviction, refusing to become just another royal concubine. She demanded the title of queen. In 1533, Henry secretly married, and despite the Pope's refusal to annul his first marriage, shortly thereafter the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, declared Henry's marriage to Catherine invalid, and his marriage to Anne was crowned Queen of England in a lavish ceremony, fulfilling her ambitious dream. In September 1533, she gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth. who would one day become one of England's greatest monarchs. However, the lack of a male heir immediately placed pressure on, and the king's desire for a son was paramount, and after a miscarriage and a stillborn child, Henry's affections began to knee his eyes started to turn to Jane Seymour, a quieter, more demure lady of the court. Anne's fiery spirit, once so attractive, now seemed a liability. Her political enemies, led by Thomas Cromwell, who had once been her ally but now saw her as an obstacle, began to conspire against her. The stage was set for one of history's most shocking royal downfalls in April 1536, and was accused of a series of heinous crimes: adultery, incest, and treason. These charges were almost certainly fabricated, designed to provide Henry with a legal justification for annulling their marriage and clearing the way for a new queen who might bear him a son. The list of Anne's alleged lovers was chilling and sensational. Mark Smeaton, a court musician, was arrested and confessed, likely under torture, to having intercourse with the Queen. His confession, though coerced, was used as key evidence. Other prominent court hearers were also implicated: Sir Henry Norris, a close friend of the King, Francis Weston, and William Barrington, most shockingly, and was accused of incest with her own brother George Boleyn by Count Rochford. Charge of incest was particularly damning, designed to utterly destroy her reputation and make her out to be a monster. Trials of Anne and her alleged lovers were swift and brutal, held before a jury of her peers, many of whom were her enemies or too terrified to oppose the king's will. Despite her eloquent offense and the lack of concrete evidence, all the accused were found guilty. The fact that the jury for George Boleyn included his own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, highlights the extreme pressure and injustice of the proceedings. On May 17, 1536, the accused courtiers, including George Boleyn, were executed on Tower Hill, and herself was confined to the Tower of London. On May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn walked to the scaffold within the Tower precinct. She delivered a calm, dignified speech, acknowledging the law and accepting her fate, but subtly maintaining her innocence. She knelt before a specially commissioned executioner from Cala, who wielded a sword rather than the usual axe, a final macabre concession to her royal status. With a single stroke, and Boleyn, Queen of England, was dead. Her head separated from her body was quickly buried in an unmarked grave in the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Ventula within the Tower. Her marriage, though no formal record of this marriage exists, their partnership was a powerful engine for Russia's expansion, particularly in the south, leading to the annexation of Crimea and the development of new territories. Pumpkin effectively controlled much of the Russian government and military during his ascendancy. Even after their romantic passion cooled, they remained lifelong friends and political allies, a testament to the depth of their connection throughout her reign. Catherine continued to take younger lovers, often referred to as favorites or lieutenants. These relationships were not just personal, they were institutionalized. The favorites were often chosen for their looks, charm, and intelligence, and they were showered with gifts, titles, and political influence. Some of her notable younger favorites included Alexander Vasilchikov, Alexander Lanskoy, and Clayton Subbub. Lanskoy in particular was a favorite sheeply cherished, and his death in 1784 left her devastated. Her final favorite, Platon Subbub, was 40 years her junior and wielded significant power in her final years. These relationships, while often criticized by her contemporaries in other European courts as immoral, were also seen as a pragmatic way for Catherine to maintain power, reward loyalty, and ensure the energy. Her system of favorites was in stark contrast to the discreet affairs of other monarchs. Catherine's court was an open secret, where the power dynamics of these relationships were largely transparent. Catherine the Great's scandalous personal life, though often exaggerated in popular culture, was inextricably linked to her political triumph. She defied the societal norms of her time, asserting her sexual autonomy in a way that few female monarchs dared. Her relationships with men were not just about love or lust, they were a deliberate strategy to solidify her rule, secure her succession, and surround herself with capable individuals who could help her govern and expand the vast Russian Empire. The empress who enlightened Russia also challenged traditional notions of female behavior, creating a legacy where her private passions and public power were two sides of the same extraordinary coin. Number 1 Cleopatra 2 Cleopatra the Seventh Philopator. The last active pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt, born around 69 BC. Was a queen of immense charisma, intelligence, and ambition. Her reign was a desperate struggle to maintain Egypt's independence in the face of Rome's burgeoning power. To achieve this, she famously formed strategic and deeply personal alliances with two of the most powerful men in the Roman world, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. These relationships, far from being mere romantic dalliances, were highly calculated political maneuvers that profoundly shaped the course of Roman and Egyptian history, cementing Cleopatra's place as one of the most scandalous and captivating figures of antiquity. Her first major entanglement began in 48 BCE when the Roman General Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt pursuing his rival Pompey the Great. At the time, Cleopatra was engaged in a power struggle with her younger brother and co-ruler Ptolemy XIII. Recognizing Caesar as the key to her throne, Cleopatra, then just 21 years old, famously smuggled herself into his quarters, reportedly wrapped in a carpet, to present her case. Her audacity and charm immediately captivated Caesar, then a man in his 50s. Their alliance quickly blossomed into a passionate affair. Caesar sided with Cleopatra in the Alexandrian War, ensuring her victory and her sole rule over Egypt. Their relationship produced a son, Caesarion, born in 47 BCE, whose name meant Little Caesar, a clear testament to his father's identity. Cleopatra's presence in Rome with Caesar was a sensational scandal that electrified the Roman Republic. She lived in Caesar's private villa on the Tiber, a blatant disregard for Roman marital customs, as Caesar was already married. Roman society, though accustomed to powerful men having affairs, found Cleopatra's public presence and their clear relationship deeply unsettling, particularly because she was a foreign queen who had a son with a Roman leader. Her lavish lifestyle and her symbolic challenge to Roman tradition fueled resentment among the conservative elite. When Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March in 44 BCE, Cleopatra was forced to flee Rome, returning to Egypt to secure her kingdom for herself and her son. 4 years later, in 41 BC, Cleopatra encountered Mark Antony, one of the three triumvirs who now ruled the Roman world. Antony, a dashing and powerful general, summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus to account for her loyalty to the Roman Republic. Cleopatra arrived in spectacular fashion, sailing up the Cydnus River on a gilded barge, dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, surrounded by musicians and perfumed attendants. Her entrance immediately enchanted Antony, and what followed was an intense and enduring love affair that blended political alliance with deep personal devotion. Their relationship solidified into a powerful bond, leading to the birth of three children: twins Alexander, Helios, and Cleopatra, Selene, and later Ptolemy. Philadelphia. Antony, captivated by Cleopatra and the wealth of Egypt, spent increasing amounts of time in Alexandria, neglecting his Roman duties, and his marriage to Octavia, the sister of his fellow triumvirate Octavian. This public devotion to a foreign queen and his apparent adoption of Eastern customs was a major source of scandal and political propaganda for Octavian, who skillfully used it to portray Antony as disloyal to Rome and enslaved by an exotic temptress. The most audacious act of their union came in 34 BC with the donations of Alexandria. In a grand public ceremony, Antony declared Cleopatra and their children rulers of vast Roman territories, effectively carving up the Roman Empire to create a Hellenistic kingdom for his new family. This outrageous act shocked and infuriated Rome, providing Octavian with the perfect pretext for war. Conflict culminated in the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, a decisive naval battle where Antony and Cleopatra's combined forces were utterly defeated by Octavian. The defeat signaled the end of their political and military power. Antony and Cleopatra fled back to Egypt, pursued by Octavian as Octavian closed in on Alexandria in 30 BCE. Their tragic end unfolded, Antony receiving a false report of Cleopatra's death fell on his own sword, though he died in Cleopatra's arms. Cleopatra, captured by Octavian, attempted to negotiate for her children's safety, but realizing she would be paraded as a captive in Rome, chose to die on her own terms. She committed suicide by allowing an ass, a venomous snake to bite her. Her dramatic death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the independent pharaonic rule of Egypt, which subsequently became a Roman province. The story of Cleopatra Ith is a timeless tale of a queen who wielded love as a weapon and a shield, challenging the might of Rome with her charisma and ambition, and whose scandalous romances with two of history's most formidable figures.